Welcome to Into the End Zone. I don't know if anybody's here with us, but we'll find out very quickly. My name is Eric Hansen. Oh, we do have people here. He's Bob Morton. I just got back from the stadium, and the reason we didn't do this right after the game was because ESPN and ABC has rules about doing live shows when they have the rights to something, so that was a no-no. So we're here with you now. We're going to take your questions. We're going to talk about Notre Dame's 27-17 victory over Indiana at Notre Dame Stadium tonight in the first game of the 12-team college football playoff, which for the next few hours, all kinds of records were set for the 12-team playoff. So I am going to, if you haven't already started to ask us questions, fill up the queue. I already have some in there, but we'll take your questions. We're going to talk a little bit first. We'll work some of them in during the show. And anyways, now that we're done playing music for you, Notre Dame wins 27-17 over Indiana. They advance to the Sugar Bowl, which is a quarterfinal game, January 1st, 8:45 Eastern Time kickoff, January 1st in New Orleans against 2-seed Georgia. So, Bob, let's get your initial, give me your best two takeaways from the game tonight.
Yeah, best two takeaways is it was a really dominant performance by Notre Dame, really from start to finish. But my second takeaway is that was not a perfect game by Notre Dame. I think that I felt like, we really had a safe game plan, really effective. That 16-play drive to put us up 14-0 really, I think, dictated what was going to happen the rest of the game. And we never put the ball in danger. I don't think Riley ever let go of the ball again that put it into anybody's possession other than Notre Dame's. And we didn't have to do anything kind of scary or take a whole lot of chances because our defense was just that elite. And we just, because of that 98-yard run that Jeremiah Love had, we were able to just kind of grind the running game and really just take the ticks off the clock and just take the life out of this IU team that really wanted to keep up the tempo, keep up the excitement, and they were just kind of in the meat grinder with Notre Dame. So really great performance by them for the team they were going against, but I don't think we saw this picture of an elite game that hopefully we still have in our tank over the next, couple weeks.
Marcus said after the game, Marcus Freeman in the press conference, which was a marathon press conference, which is why we're starting pretty late here, that he was actually kind of glad that there was a messy garbage time for them, that this is going to help them be humble, and that'll give them some things to work on. I'm curious, what was your take about IU's kind of being able to get the onside kick and getting a couple of garbage touchdowns at the end of the game?
I got to be honest, I had left the stadium at that point. I had family that I had to get back somewhere. And so we didn't find out about the scores until later. But I just don't think it matters. I think that in a closer game, obviously there's attention to detail. And I think as a coaching staff, you want to be able to lean on those things to end strongly. But I think to anybody that cares about football, to anybody who looked at this game and wondered if IU could upset Notre Dame, this was a 27-3 ball game. And there was nothing that IU could do until Notre Dame went into the prevent defense. And so I think that I'm not a coach, so I don't need to find those like pressure points to really kind of keep a team driving forward. But I would be pretty darn happy as a team that for all the important minutes of the game, it was 27-3. And this, the IU run defense couldn't really stop the run. The IU offense couldn't really get going. The game just felt out of hand pretty quickly, even though we weren't executing super well.
Having seen tonight's game and having seen the SEC championship game, does your opinion change at all about how you think Notre Dame might match up with Georgia and how deep of a run Notre Dame can make in this playoff?
Not one bit. My opinion doesn't change at all because I feel like I didn't love the IU matchup because I don't like playing teams with nothing to lose.
Mm-hmm.
But I really liked Notre Dame's. I like Notre Dame's draw in this tournament. I think that getting through IU, going through Georgia with some pretty big question marks, with some time to really prepare for a dual threat quarterback, and being on the side of the bracket we are, I think Notre Dame has a chance as good as anybody to win, several games in a row and make a really deep run. And so what I saw today was pretty exciting, that I feel like we did what we came to do in this game.
I wanted to talk to you about players of the game, but I did want to talk to you about one of the things I asked Marcus. We talked about this in a little bit in the press box. When Marcus first came to Notre Dame, he talked about, I want to build an offensive line, defensive line driven program. How do you feel like those two areas showed up tonight?
Yeah, I think it was really interesting to see how well the offensive line did, right? I think that you look at the pass protection, Riley really had a lot of time. I think when they shuffled some guys around, which I think we should talk about a little bit, if I'm honest with you, when they shuffled some guys around, I think there was a couple series where it seemed like a down lineman really got free. But if you looked at the interior, offensive line in the running game, there was a lot of movement on the inside. I actually feel like Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price spent a little too much time trying to get to the outside when there was some soft room in the middle. I feel like the offensive line was even more dominant than they looked throughout the course of the game. But it was really impressive on the offensive side of the ball. And then defensively, I've been waiting the entire first half for us to create chaos in front of Rourke, this quarterback from IU. And I didn't know where that was going to come from. Are we going to have to blitz more guys? Are we going to have to bring, Xavier Watts off the edge and do something? And lo and behold, it's Bryce Young and Riley Mills, in 3 plays getting 2 sacks that really kind of created this pressure that started getting into the backfield in a pretty quick way. And so I was really impressed with the last several weeks for our offensive line. But in the second half, I feel like our defensive line really did everything we needed to do to keep our defensive backs in safe positions and still disrupt the quarterback's timing.
Okay. So I picked 2 players of the game. I always do, game balls. I'm wondering who your players of the game were.
So I'm going to let you go first because we talked a little bit about this, but I want to make sure we get 4 guys' names out there, okay. And I want to make sure that I don't take your guys before you go. So who are your 2, Eric?
Right, and guys, I see your questions coming in. We are going to get to them, so thanks for submitting them and keep them coming because we'll have a nice long question and answer time. I went with Jeremiah Love on offense because I felt like that set the tone for the game, and that put IU on its heels. There was a lot of tough sledding in trying to gain yards after that, and yet, Notre Dame had some long drives. They were able to kind of chip their way down the field, but I think that was a haymaker that landed, and I thought that was especially – it's such a big momentum swing there where it looked like IU was going to come down and score. Xavier Watts gets the interception. Notre Dame gets the ball on the 1.5-yard line. And the very next play, Jeremiah Love is headed to the end zone. And then my defensive player of the game was Xavier Watts, who I can say now I actually saved my 3rd place vote in the Heisman for somebody that's kind of unconventional. And I voted Xavier Watts. I think he means that much to this team. I think he showed it today. He should have been a unanimous All-American. He had 10 tackles tonight, the big interception, but just the confidence he builds around with his teammates, the level of play that he lifts with his teammates, the standard he sets by great examples, and a guy that's been selfless since he stepped on campus. I mean, this is a guy that could have jumped in the transfer portal a bunch of times 100%. Early in his career when he was a wide receiver and wasn't getting any play. And he stayed at Notre Dame because he loved Notre Dame and he believed in his coaches and their vision for him, and it's paying off for them now. So how about you, Bob? Who are your players of the game?
I mean, listen, if I'm going first, I'm going to pick those two guys. I think you go against the team that's got this number one rushing defense, and what people don't realize is you get to be the number one rushing defense by not giving up big plays, right? Like you just don't give up big plays. You can't be the number one rushing defense if you give up, anything over 50 yards in one play, because that just skews everything. And Jeremiah Love did what Jeremiah Love does, which is he hit the hole, and in 3 steps, he went from what should have been a 15-yard gain tackled by a cornerback to a 98-yard touchdown, where if you looked at him come around the corner, anybody who's watched him run saw, man, he had a little bit of hitch in his giddy up. He's not 100% right now, but Jeremiah Love at 90% still outran everybody on IU's defense. And so I think that was absolutely spectacular. Things to clean up, absolutely. But I think he was a game changer. For me, though, I think my game ball just has to go to Riley Leonard. I think obviously you have a couple plays where I think he took the down lineman a little bit for granted and let some hands get on the ball. Obviously, that first interception was kind of a freak thing. The guy didn't even rush the quarterback. He was stuck on the line of scrimmage. He just got his hands up at the right time. But when you just look at the way he controls the ball, how many times did he have 2 or 3 guys that kind of broke through the line and he would spin out, and he always gave our receivers an opportunity to make a play, whether it was Faison catching it for a first down. Mitch Evans missed one that would have been another first down. I just really think that he controls the tempo for this offense and keeps us in a safe place the entire time. On the defensive side of the ball, when I say I agree, I can't agree anymore about Xavier Watts being the number one guy. I think at halftime, he had 7 or 8 tackles. Nobody else in the defense had more than 3. He was making tackles on the edge. He was making tackles in the backfield. He was stopping runs at the line of scrimmage. But I've got to go with somebody else. And so there are 2 people I want to talk about. One is Jack Kaiser. His leadership in the middle, the linebacking core did a great job. But there were several tackles that were made by either Bo Burnham or somebody else on the inside that were a direct result of Jack Kaiser blowing up his blocker in the backfield. And then the second person, somebody put it into our comment section already. There was a little misdirection play. IU faked a run to the right and hit a reverse back to the left. And the reverse was there. And as I watch, 2 people, Leonard Moore, who had a really good game himself, set the edge, and Jalen Sneed sprinted from the other side of the field and ran down that reverse. I just can't overstate. Notre Dame has not had this much team speed, specifically on defense, in a long, long time. And so watching like this team come together and a game that maybe would have gone for 20, 25 yards in years past, being stopped for a 1-yard gain or a 2-yard loss, it's just impressive overall. So I'll give it to the Notre Dame linebackers, pretty much led by Kaiser and the speed of Jalen Sneed.
One more question I'm going to fire at Bob, then we're going to get to your questions. You guys are awesome to be here this late at night, and I don't know how highly caffeinated you are or whatever else you got going, but we appreciate you. So we're going to do more questions than we normally do, and I'm going to shut up. But I'm going to ask Bob this first. The atmosphere tonight, it was supposed to be a home field advantage for Notre Dame. Man, it felt like it tonight. This was maybe the best crowd I can remember at Notre Dame Stadium. What were your thoughts? And do you remember a crowd like that during your playing time?
Yeah, no, I never experienced a home crowd like that. I've experienced some really loud atmospheres in different times, and you can get that place rocking, from time to time. But Notre Dame Stadium, a game day at Notre Dame is notoriously, the mystique is kind of pregame and postgame, and in the stadium it tends to get a little bit quiet, right? That's the knock that all the players will kind of openly admit, and that's, I think, what we recognize about ourselves sometimes. I want to give a shout out to the Notre Dame football operations team. As much as I think the fans, really owned it and were loud, there are natural lulls in the game. And I think in the first half specifically, whether it was, pitching down to Jerome Bettis on the sidelines, or whether it was, a message on the video board, or Father Pete, saying something and all of a sudden music coming in, the swag and surf being played. They just did so many, Freddie Mercury as a chipmunk, like all of these things that happened created moments in the 2-minute and 50-second commercial breaks that kept the stadium in tune with the moment, so that whenever IU's offense came back on the field, the crowd was ready to get loud again. And I think there were some misses. I think there always will be. But I think Notre Dame football operations, for maybe 90% of the things they put on the video board, the interviews they did, if you get a chance to see it on social media, going back and forth between the comedian Shane Gillis, where all the fans would cheer really loud, and then putting an IU fan and everybody would boo, and going back and forth. They just created an atmosphere that I have never experienced at Notre Dame Stadium. It's not about flashing lights and loud music. It's about trying to keep your finger on the pulse of what a home field advantage is. And I will say this was an amazing playoff atmosphere. But I truly believe that Notre Dame is close to unlocking a secret sauce for a night game atmosphere that once or twice a year we're going to be able to utilize. Because when I look back to the Florida State game, it was a fun night game, but some of the videos and songs, it just didn't connect with this like raucous atmosphere. Tonight is very, very different. Great job by Notre Dame football operations.
Okay, we're going to start going to your guys' questions now, so keep them coming, keep feeding us. And by the way, I tried to get Mark Cuban to join us, but we settled for Bob. Bob and Mark Cuban met in the hallway. I thought they were both going to kick me off the show, but fortunately you're with this combination. So here we go. From Mike DeVoy, I saw Spindler was out for at least part of the second half. Did he return? If not, how's he doing? He did not return. He was in street clothes. Sam Pendleton replaced him at right guard for the rest of the game. And we did not get an update after the game. I believe the next time we talk to Marcus is when we're going to get updates on the injuries. And Riley Mills also left the game from a defensive standpoint and did not return. Now, he had his helmet in his hand for a while.
They took it away from him, though.
Yeah, they took it away from him. I think he wanted to try to go back in. That one didn't seem quite as serious, but the Rocco Spindler one, that may be something that's a little bit more long-term. So let me follow up on Mike's question here and feed this to you. How did you think Pendleton played? And then you made a remark. Bob was up in the press box with Tyler James and I. What do you make of Billy Schrouth starting out at right guard, Pendleton starting at left guard? Now they're flipped. I mean, do you think they need to stay in these spots now?
Listen, I went on WSBT radio this morning. I guess it was this afternoon. It's been a long day. And I kind of tooted my own horn because it's like, hey, not every offensive lineman can go from the left guard to right guard or from the right tackle to the left tackle. Like some guys are kind of limited. They have to stay on one side of the formation or the other. And then, of course, the guy who started our season as our right guard is now our left guard. And the guy who started our season as the left guard went in as the right guard. And I just think you look at what Joe Rudolph has done, and he's really created a series of 6'4" to 6'6" Swiss Army knives or utility knives where they can go in wherever they're needed. And you just look at what that has done for the cohesiveness of this team. You know, like when Rocco came in at the beginning of the season, he elevated the offensive line's play, and he was a backup because he brought some steadiness and some experience. And then now Pendleton comes back and he filled in really well. I will say there was a little bit of a break in assignments. I mentioned it a couple of times that there were some down linemen getting free in the passing game when Pendleton came into the game. I'm not saying it was Sam's responsibility, but I do think that they were really trying to iron out, a little bit different things. But Joe Rudolph has done a great job of creating people who can play multiple positions. And I'm not sure what things will look like come the Sugar Bowl. I don't know if they'll evaluate if maybe, Billy goes back to right guard and Sam to left, or Rocco's able to come back. Like, I just think that you've bought yourself some time to say, hey, we're going to find our best five and we're going to fit them where they fit best together. And you've shown that you have guys that can put their right and left hand both down. And man, I was really impressed by that, especially for a young guy like Pendleton. But also really impressed by Coach Rudolph and really the expectation he's put in that if you want to play, you got to be able to play both sides of the line, multiple positions. So really interesting to see that development, happen in the midst of the game today.
Okay, we have from Joe Peters, I think Denbrock held back in his play calling once it got to 20-3. I think it was deliberate to give UGA less tape to review. Now, Bob, Mike Denbrock, you've known him for years. He was one of the offensive line coaches when you were there. I'm curious what you think of Joe's theory there.
I think it's a fine theory. I'll say this, like, it was 20-3 when we threw that post, down the middle to the 2-yard line. And I don't know if anybody else, like, I literally had a flashback to NIU when he underthrew that for an interception because, like, we didn't need to throw that deep ball. I think what my response to that, Joe, would be this. I have seen different running schemes and passing schemes used by our offense and Coach Denbrock just about every game for the last 6-7 weeks. He uses different motion to set up different blocking schemes. He has a game plan to use his tight ends or a game plan to use his slot receivers. Today, when they needed a first down, they were going to throw that, kind of 8-yard hitch to Bo Collins on the outside. They utilize different things, and you do that for two reasons. One is to create an offense that can do all of those things, but another thing is you're trying to capitalize maybe on one or two weak points that each defense has. So I agree that we weren't going to show Georgia everything, but I also would suggest the reason why we're not showing Georgia everything is because we are going to have a vastly different game plan to account for what Georgia does well and what they don't do well. I would expect the game plan for Georgia to be vastly different than we saw today. We were very intentional about how we attacked IU to do what we do well and to grind that game out. And I think with Georgia, you're going to see us have to throw the ball beyond 10 yards. Because when we've had trouble with SEC teams in the past, it's because we throw these short passes or we run the ball and their defense is able to keep everything in front of them and be super aggressive. And so we didn't have to challenge IU beyond 10 yards. We're going to need to do that against the Bulldogs, in a week and a half's time.
Okay, we have another one from Mike DeVoy. Were you as surprised as I was to see them keep going at Leonard Moore after the struggles that Christian Gray had against USC?
Yeah, and so not only that, Mike, I was surprised they kept going after Leonard Moore after the first pass they threw towards Christian Gray, where he held on to that guy like it was his baby. You know what I mean? Like he was grabbing on that the first play to Christian Gray. He played terribly. The guy made the catch despite pass interference by 29. I will say Gray really settled in well, like really, really settled in well. But every single time they went after Leonard Moore had his head turned back around and could have made a play on that ball. One time it was questionable. Adon Schuler tipped the ball, but it was going to be close that Moore might have gotten his hands on it and pulled it down anyway. It's crazy to me that you had a freshman sitting on the sideline, you lose your best DB, and there's a really arguable position that Leonard Moore is our best cornerback right now. And he is just feeling it right now, and his ability to kind of turn and spot the ball has been unbelievable. He did a phenomenal job. IU would have been smart to try and go to the other side of the field.
Okay, we have one from Rajon. Bob, I was so impressed how many times ND defenders seem to know what the other team is going to do pre-snap. They start pointing and shouting out to each other. What can you say about that?
I think if you look back, we talked about this the Navy game before I got kicked out of MetLife Stadium. I was so impressed the Navy game because every motion or package that Navy had, we had an adjustment for. And I said I had never seen a Notre Dame defense so pre-snap prepared for what a team was going to do. And they have been that way every single game. And so tonight, you are seeing something that defines this defense. They are not just led by one player, but they are a team that buys in to their cues and their keys. And so their communication, they never take for granted what the person next to them is seeing, and they are communicating, this is what I see, this is what we've prepared, I'm going to do this, you're going to do that, check with me, sounds great, and they run it. And I think there are times when it looks like a really simple play gets made for a tackle for no gain, that if they would have run the defense as it was called, they might have gotten gashed on that play. But the adjustment that is communicated from the inside to the outside backers to the DBs, the safeties, you have, a guy like Xavier Watts to clean it all up. Like, this team is ready for what teams are going to do. Like, it makes me proud to say that I think that this defense studies film the right way for the teams that they're going to play against. And it's impressive to watch. I agree with you.
Somebody brought up Mitch Jeter, and then somebody else did, but I couldn't find the original question. So whoever asked it, thank you for doing it. But I was trying to pour through it. What did you think of Mitch Jeter's 2 field goals that he made? And then what did you make of the block?
Yeah, so the 2 field goals that he made, man, he needed that first one, right? Like, let's get that off his back a little bit. What I liked about it was really good height, really good spin. Would not have been good from 55. I've seen him kick longer ones, but he made solid contact. It went the direction he wanted to. That was great. I disagreed with people that I was sitting next to watching the game, because people were saying that the blocked kick had something to do with the offensive line, because I forget who it was. It might have been Tosh Baker. Didn't really, pick up his head in blocking. When it comes to a field goal, if you don't get blown back as an offensive lineman, there's nobody on earth that should be able to jump high enough to block that kick. Mitch Jeter misstruck that ball. That was a low kick. And in a close game, that's unacceptable. And so you're going to have teams who are going to push and jump every single time he kicks the ball. And I think that he's really got to focus on trying to lift that ball to get it higher off his foot. Because he hit it, he struck it well, but it was a solid 5 or 6 feet lower than it should have been. And, you just can't afford to have that in a closer game. So really good that he got those 2, but that third one is pretty ugly.
Joe Long says, imagine having KVA, Traore, Botello, Morrison on D this year. Holy moly.
You know what? I love that thought, but let's save that thought for February 1st, right? Whatever the end of this season looks like. And this sounds like a correction, Joe, and it's not meant a correction towards you, but like I had the thought before the USC game, if USC beat Notre Dame a couple weeks ago, what was I going to say on this show? And I knew in that moment that I was going to say, man, I'm just really thankful and grateful that we had a team string off 10 wins in a row to get us to this point where the game mattered again. Because this team could have rolled over early. A lot of people could have just kind of given up on the team, and they didn't. And so, yeah, I would have loved to watch a fully healthy Botello rushing on the outside tonight. And I would have loved if Leonard Moore pushed to be our, slot corner or really challenged Christian Gray. And I would have done all, and I would have, seen all these guys do amazing things. But I'm really proud of the way this team's playing right now. And I still feel, why not Notre Dame over the next 3 games? And so I see you kind of respond, Joe, I'm glad you're taking this as well as I intend it. Like, don't let what could have been take away our appreciation for the really special nature of this defense and this team as a whole, because this just doesn't come around long. Like, it doesn't come around enough for us to take it for granted.
All right. I think, Bob, the last thing that I want to ask you is, as they go into this week preparing for Georgia, they got about a week and a half. They have to deal with Christmas. If you're Marcus, how do you deal with the Christmas holiday in the middle of this? What do you think needs to be the emphasis as they get ready for Georgia?
I think you find a way to create a family atmosphere, and you have fun. So, there were several times that we were at a bowl site over Christmas, and we would have like 110 person Secret Santa. You know what I mean? And it's really funny when you've got, a defensive lineman getting a gift for an O lineman, and they might be friends, but it's even funnier when you get a DB that doesn't hang out with this offensive lineman getting a gift. And like, it just ends up being this absolute massive chaos, and it ends up being a whole lot of fun. And I think that everyone in that locker room knows that this is a business trip, and everybody in that room is looking for the next game to solidify what kind of year they've had and almost make up for the fact that they lost to NIU and they shouldn't have. Everybody is out there trying to prove themselves. And so you've got to find a way to make sure you don't burn that candle too hot too soon. And so create some family time, create some fun, but like some fun where you're able to kind of keep resting and recuperating the body. And then when you get into game mode, like, turn it on. I've said every time Marcus Freeman's made a mistake, he doesn't make the same mistake twice. I think our team's going to be ready to go for Georgia. It's going to be really exciting to see what kind of we put out on the field in a week and a half.
All right, that's going to do it for tonight. Man, I really appreciate everybody that showed up live. I thought this might be an empty room, being as late as it was and not even knowing when we were going to start. But if Bob is willing, we'll do another one of these. He is, after, and we'll do it right after the Sugar Bowl game. We'll be able to do it right after. So thanks, everybody, for tuning in. If you were half asleep or you had too much libations, rewatch the show in the morning and tell your friends. Thanks again for joining us on Into the End Zone. Have a great night, everybody.